Hey, it looks like we've got everybody in, so we'll just go ahead and get started. There will be stragglers, there always are. So thank you for joining us. If you wouldn't mind putting in the chat your name and your location, that helps us know how far and wide we are meeting people. And also, always, if you think or have a topic in mind that would be helpful, I'm starting to set up a schedule for next year. So please put that in the chat as well, and we'll take everything into consideration. So thank you so much for joining us. If you wouldn't mind changing the slide. So this presentation was prepared for NTAC, but it is done with our sources, and it is in the public domain, but it is not part of SAMHSA. So it's part of NTAC as our contract is with SAMHSA. So next slide, please. So just in case there are any security issues that may occur, this session will immediately end and will not resume using the same link. And a separate email will be sent to you with to all the participants with further instructions. Never had that happen, but I've heard it have had to other people. So we just want to make sure that you're aware. Okay, next slide, please. These are all of the wonderful participants or partners of NTAC who work together to bring this event and others. And please go to their website to find all of the stuff that's available from all of the partners who work together on NTAC. Next slide, please. This is the mission for NTAC is that all children, youth, and families living with and impacted by mental health challenges will have access to resources and opportunities they need to thrive in a comprehensive and equitable system of care. A lot of things that they do that are around that will, so please pay attention to that. Next slide. One of the biggest events we have every year, or NTAC has every year, is the System of Care Virtual Summit. This year it's on May 14th through 16th. Here's a link for you to register for that if you have not already, and it is always an awesome event, and they have lots of things for all kinds of people, everything that you want to know. Last year, the keynotes were especially great, and I expect that they will be this year as well, too. Next slide. So just a little bit of housekeeping for you. You will get a certificate of completion for this event. It will either come from Joanne Bloom at CARS or from Bridget at CARS, who will send that out to you. You can get a copy of this presentation that was used for this event, and it will be, Bridget will send out an email with within 2 business days following the presentation that will include the slides and any additional resources that we talk about today. And can you get a copy of this for this event? And this is also, the link for that will be in the follow-up email, and it's also available under resources on the NTAC website. And I just learned today it's in their YouTube channel file under Family Exchange, NTAC's YouTube channel. So if you can find it in a number of places. Next slide, please. So welcome again to today's session, and it's the ripple effect or caregiver burnout prevention, and we're so excited to have our presenters with us. Next slide. A little bit about what we're going to talk about today is compassion fatigue versus caregiver burnout, coping strategies for stress and empowering resilience. What is the ripple effect? And they're going to wind that through their whole presentation. and talking about creating caregiver personas. And then we'll talk a little bit about what's happening next month and what you have to look forward to. So next slide. Good. These are our two wonderful presenters, Christy Horner, who's the executive director of Carriage to Caregivers, and it's in Ohio, but I don't know what part of Ohio, and I'll let you talk about that some more. And Jenny Woodworth, who is the director of programs at Courage to Caregivers. This is their presentation, and they'll give you all the great information. So I'm going to turn it over to you, Christy and Jenny, and I will be watching the chat for things that might come through there. So have a good one.
Thank you so much, Lori. Thank you so much, Bridget. We appreciate your partnership, and we're really excited to present to those who are here with us today. I've taken part on the other side in many of these NTech conversations as part of the series and have just really appreciated all of the various content. So hopefully Jenny and I can sprinkle some of the tips and tools that we've learned along the way as we have supported unpaid family caregivers. You'll hear a little bit more about what we do at Courage to Caregivers. Yes, I am, in fact, an unpaid family caregiver myself. I have cared for a brother with severe mental illness. I've also cared for aging parents and then a young adult son who suffered a traumatic brain injury as a result of an accident. So I'm really a lifelong caregiver when we get to that part of our presentation today. I'm also a certified family peer supporter in the state of Ohio. That is the license we're credentialed with here in Ohio through Ohio Mental Health and Addiction Services. And I'm also a trainer for the NAMI Ohio Family Peer Support credentialed class. I also see clients through our work at Courage to Caregivers, both individually and in a group format. And I'll let Jenny say a little bit about her right now.
Sure. Hey, everyone. I'm Jenny Woodworth, licensed independent social worker in the state of Ohio. Lori, we are Northeast Ohio folks. If you know anything about Cleveland, there's like an east and west divide, and never the two shall meet. You've got both of us here, west and east. Christy and I worked virtually before it was cool, so we are very adept and happy to be in this space. And I've really loved watching everybody's where you're calling from, what your credentials or work is. I really love the representation we have here of different parts of the country and different types of caregiving as well. I am a professional caregiver. I have been for much of my adult life as a social worker. I also am the parent of two small ones. So one of them just came stomping up the stairs, but she is old enough to care for herself. I gave her the message, hey, I'm doing this. She's used to it by now. Thank you. Again, global pandemic. And although we're based in Ohio, we serve caregivers all over the country. And so if you are listening to us today as we briefly talk about the folks that we support and how we support them, please feel free to reach out to us, and more on that later as we talk about contact information. Oh, and hi, Heather, also the mother to two littles. Gotcha.
That's great. And we're also both family peer support supervisors. So anyone who's in the audience, we can relate with you on that too. And all of that good work for another day. The first thing we like to normalize some of the language we use. And we keep coming back to these two concepts of compassion fatigue versus caregiver burnout for a reason. Many people didn't understand the difference, and many people might, which is great. And so we feel like we have to have that common working definition between the two. And I honestly, we start here because we see this as the problem. That burnout is the problem. As Lori said, we see ourselves in the caregiver burnout prevention business. We wish everyone who called us, we could get ahead of that, but just about everyone who calls is already there. But understanding the difference here is really important. And especially as we go through and talk about how we support different types of caregivers. As caregivers, or maybe you're a volunteer, maybe you're a professional, maybe you're that unpaid family caregiver, as a human, you've probably experienced at least one of these things at some moment in your life, whether it was emotional or physical exhaustion, whether it was a health problem, could be chronic health, could be short-term, it could be lack of sleep, trauma, primary or secondary, irritability, stress, then ultimately compassion fatigue or burnout. You've likely experienced something along that trajectory. Compassion fatigue, the working definition we work off of, is the physical and mental exhaustion and emotional withdrawal experienced by those who care for sick or traumatized people for an extended period of time. It's a very normal response to managing an extreme experience, such as being a constant caregiver for someone with an inconsistent illness. And that's all of us, anyone caring as an unpaid family caregiver or as a professional caregiver, caring for someone with an inconsistent illness. Compassion fatigue is a very normal response. Burnout comes on more slowly as the stress of caregiving builds, but compassion fatigue strikes very quickly as our resources start to be depleted and hit that empty line. We all know what that feels like. Sometimes for me, it's that like Friday afternoon bumping up against the boundaries of my limitations and capacity. So like I said, we see Courage to Caregivers in the caregiver burnout prevention business. And we see that because we like to empower caregivers to build their resilience, their tools or superpowers, as we sometimes say, for their toolbox. We're all about self-care, real sustainable practices of self-care for the caregiver. And that's for both unpaid and professional caregivers. You've likely heard that flight attendant's message. It's not new to us. We didn't make this up, but it's used very commonly for those who are taking care of others to put on your oxygen mask first before helping those around you. But what you may not know is that you actually only have 18 seconds of useful consciousness before you pass out. So getting that oxygen mask on first is essential when you're traveling, but it's also really important as we're caring for others. It's all the cliche things we hear. You can't pour from an empty cup. When there's nothing left to give, you can't give. I mean, it's essential that you take care of yourself in order to better care for others. Some of the signs of professional caregiver burnout might be less energy, emotional exhaustion, reduced productivity, motivation, or energy, neglecting your own mental or physical health, increased impatience or irritability, feeling helpless and hopeless. And we do need to put in that disclaimer that if you are among those feeling hopeless, that is reserved for the professional among us, and to make sure you seek professional help to talk about that sense of hopelessness. The secondary traumatic stress is the emotional duress that results when someone hears about the firsthand experiences of another. Very common in helping professions and especially peer supporters. As I support someone very similar story as mine, it's very common that I can be re-triggered or traumatized from hearing of their experience. It takes an emotional toll, and it takes the same toll as it does on unpaid family caregivers as they re-experience some of that trauma. So some of the signs to be aware of for that is unusual fear, excessive worry, jumpiness, being focused on traumatic outcomes, a racing heart, shortness of breath, a tension headache, and taking on other people's trauma as your own. If you're concerned about yourself or a colleague or a friend, seek counsel from one of your supervisors or a trusted mentor or a professional of your own. That's really, really important. I know that is the benefit of supervision for peer supporters, is that we come together on a regular basis, share our own challenges with our peers, work with our supervisors, Jenny in this case, to work through some of those. And she looks out for us to make sure that we're taking care of ourselves as well. And we just want to put out that the mission of Courage to Caregivers is to provide hope, support, and courage to caregivers and loved ones of those living with mental illness. And that's been our mission since day one. We're in the middle of a strategic planning process where we're reviewing our mission statement, and there's many things that continue to ring through to those that we serve. And what's really, really important that we've come to find that we care for all relationships of care, so that we have parents taking care of youth, we have youth taking care of parents, we have middle-aged people taking care of everybody. We've got siblings taking care of siblings. We've got kinship caregivers. We've got grandparents caring for grandchildren and vice versa. So many, many different relationships of care. And really, the bottom line is we're here for that caregiver, that unpaid family caregiver that's not managing, that's finding a very, very difficult time navigating this journey, that wants to take better care of themselves. We're there to support them, and we're there to assure that their mental health and well-being is well cared for. They are our primary concern. So we're here for them. Jenny, talk about what we think of as our unique solution to caregiver burnout.
Sure thing. I just want to, someone in the chat's feeling exhausted now. I just want to solidarity with you because I used to do that slide a lot. And I was like, hey, Christy, I can't even do this slide right now. Like I just talking about it sometimes is a little too much. So we get it. We don't ask for a lot of audience participation in this presentation. So other presentations, we ask for people, have you felt all these things? So thank you for being brave and putting it out there. I think the way you feel is mirrored by many other people on this call, if I may be so bold. So you're seeing on the screen our why. If you're familiar with like Scott Sennick, that's one of his concepts, like why do we do this work? And it is because of this, that family caregivers experiencing extreme stress have been shown to age prematurely. And this level of stress can take off as many as 10 years off a family caregiver's life. And if you are a professional caregiver, you probably feel very similar levels of stress, and probably it may be a similar statistic for someone like you as well. Again, I don't say this to be dire, I just say this to be real. This is why we do the things we do. We have programming here on the screen. Again, I really encourage you to reach out to us. And if any of this strikes you as someone who, you may want to look more into our breathing meditation, our group coaching, or our peer support, or for someone that you support in your professional world. So that's what we do. And we'd love to reach people before they're falling in that river, before they're like, oh gosh, I'm already feeling like 10 years have come off of my life. We don't want to be in this kind of putting out fires, catching people or pulling people out of the river. We want to, we hope that the work that we do finds solutions for preventing caregiver burnout, as opposed to like treating that already entrenched burnout. When Christy mentioned, like most people contact us when they are already feeling burnt out. And maybe you're seeing this in the work you do or feeling this yourself. So, I mean, this is our goal. We're not going to be able to, we don't have the secret sauce and answer. We can't do all that here, but we're hoping that the work we're doing is just moving us towards that place.
And this whole concept of a ripple effect, again, we didn't create the concept of the ripple effect. That's been along and used as an analogy or a metaphor for many, many different concepts. But really for us, what happened was she's now on our board, and she reached out one year around the holidays, which are really, really difficult times for caregivers. And we really ramp up our support services during that time for them. But she reached out. She's not an unpaid family caregiver, yet she's supporting a lot of people who are those unpaid family caregivers. And she said, I don't know what to do. My best friend's loved one is living with mental illness and facing many, many challenges. How can I best support her? What can I do? What will be most meaningful? And she was one, and then maybe two, and then maybe three, and now many, many people like that. We'll just put that as an extended support network, which we're going to talk about today as well, called and said, we want to know, we don't have experience as unpaid family caregivers. We're carers and we care, but we don't know how to support them best. How can we support them? And we thought, well, we support those primary family caregivers, but maybe we can come up with some tools and useful ways for you to better help and support those caregivers in your care. And this now board member who gave us this idea we think of this ripple effect as the person living with the mental, chronic, or serious illness as the stone that drops in the water. They're that plop. Then that unpaid family caregiver, or the person caring for them, is that first wave, if you will, of support. Then the next wave becomes the caregiver support network, of which my friend who was calling was one of. And then we start to look at the entire care team, and that's all of our systems of care that are in place, all of the different places we have to, that are agencies. And Jenny's going to give some examples later of what that support network and care team can look like, all based on the way that stone plops into the water. And so, again, feel free to put in the chat box. We put up here, again, we don't have a ton of extra engagement built into this presentation, but we'd love to hear from you as we start to talk about how we see the role of the unpaid family caregiver on the care team to someone living with mental illness should look like. And we actually spend a lot of time advocating for the caregiver being a really valued and valid member of that care team. So please put in the chat what you see the role of the caregiver on that care team being, because today's all about how do we support that caregiver, all of us in our different roles? How can we provide the best support network possible? We have a lot of caregivers out there who feel very alone, and you might be one of those. We know that many are also exhausted, and we're going to give you some insight into our personas in just a minute. It's a really long, and as I mentioned, I am a part of that lifelong caregiver journey. For many of us, we are lifelong, forever. The term is really forever carer, in the sense that it will always be a part of who I am and what I do and how I care for my son. So, Jenny, here are some of the ways caregivers need that support network. And maybe you're getting some things in the chat that I can't see since I'm advancing slides.
Let me check. Yeah. There is a comment. It's critical to not only invite caregivers, but value their work and support. And I see the caregiver role as being the lifelong guide and lifeline. Yes. And they should be the team captain and the care team. Yeah, I like that analogy for sure. So, I mean, you guys know this, they're crucial to supporting their loved ones with lived illnesses and have their own needs, both, potentially physical and mental. So what this looks like is finding these potential support networks for caregivers. There are so many ways, and many of these you're going to be like, oh yes, 100%. I would have thought of that too. Others look like other family members, friends, neighbors, colleagues, and maybe your caregiver is getting support from faith communities. Maybe you're familiar with Stephen Ministry, which is a Christian-based kind of lay counseling ministry. There are also caregiver support agencies. We are one of them. Other social service agencies, support and coaching groups. Maybe they get support through their own primary care person or their loved one's medical team. And maybe they're getting support from their own therapist. We highly encourage, even, when we do work with caregivers and in the engagement that we do, we still encourage them to have their own therapist outside of the services that we provide. Perhaps they're getting support through a peer supporter. And then, another support network piece that maybe isn't thought about often are like legal and financial support through those professionals. So those are some of the elements that we look for when we are talking about the caregiver support network.
And feel free to put in the chat if there's any other layer of support that we left off our list. It's not meant to be wholly inclusive, and you may have experience. We know that social media can be a sense of support for some people. So there's a lot of the old message boards have now turned into kind of some private Facebook groups, and we see a lot of our caregivers going there for support. We find our peer supporters, not our peer supporters, our caregivers we support just recently this week reached out to connect. They play Scrabble together online. So there could be all kinds of ways that caregivers are looking for support. Feel free to put them in the chat and we'll give each other some more ideas on ways we can help navigate and find support. I know in Ohio, a huge part of our support, peer supporter services, is both goal setting, but also navigation of services, and from a strengths-based approach, and recognizing that each caregiver is going to have a very different support network. It's going to look very different. And even those who feel very much alone, which we'll talk about here in a minute, we can help find some additional supports for those caregivers.
I want to add some things that are in the chat here.
Go for it.
Caregiver and family voice can provide the best insight. This is too often overlooked, which adds to the exhaustion. And that is such a valid point. That is just exhausting and frustrating when you are not overlooked, or when you are overlooked and not considered. Other people are talking about reflective practices with peers as part of the support network. And then someone wrote, always guide them to get support, since often we tend to leave it as the last option when it should be otherwise, referring to a therapist of any kind, as well as a physician of their choice. And someone also echoing support groups. And obviously that's something we believe in strongly as a part of a support network for caregivers. Thanks, everybody.
So important. I'm so glad people have added for our lists. So when that friend came and said, let's really look at how we can formalize some resources for this ripple effect, that outer layer of people trying their best to support the unpaid family caregiver without their own lived experience, she had used this process. And of course, I had heard about it, but we had not used it here quite yet, using a design thinking process, which really begins and ends with empathy. And if anything that caregivers know about, it's empathy, right? That feeling with another person. They're some of the most empathetic individuals I know. And empathy mapping, which Jenny's going to talk to you about next, is really that first step. So this is all in the name of really understanding who our audience is, both the constituent we serve, which is the unpaid family caregiver in our case, then understanding the ripple effect, the next layer for the support network for the caregiver, and really using this process to get to what do caregivers need? Because Jenny and I can come up with 100 different things and ways that we could support someone else, but they may not be what that unique caregiver needs. So this is all in the name of seeing, hearing, and understanding the person we're trying to support and understanding what they need. Because if there's anything that we know about caregivers, most of them are not very good at sharing what they need. So we've got to get to that and how we find that out. And this is the process we used. So please, Jenny, share about empathy mapping and why that was so important to our process.
Sure thing. So we took this, this is often used in the business world. So this is really, but this looks so tender. This doesn't look businessy, this heart on the screen. And that's really where we took it from, a more tender place, we'd like to think, than, perhaps someone who's working in serial marketing. So this is a visualization used to articulate what we know about users, but in our case, caregivers. So what they need, and this would help us make better decisions about how to best support them, to use internally, to share with other people. So like Christy's friend who was approached her originally. This is the transfer from the business world is, I think the main takeaway is that we aren't using this in maybe the traditional sense. So we're empathy mapping to make sure we understand the people we serve and how we can support them and their own support team. So you'll see on the screen, there's 4 quadrants, what caregivers say, think, do, and feel. And, we use this process to help remove bias from, our programming, our designs, the way we interact with people, and give us a single shared understanding of the caregivers we serve. And so removing bias has always been really important to us as we kind of go through all of our program evaluation. And so this is something we really got behind. We wanted to discover weaknesses in our approach, uncover needs that the caregivers themselves might not even be aware of, and we'll talk a little bit about that themselves. Some people don't even want to call themselves caregivers, and again, we get that. It helps us understand what drives caregiver behaviors and guides us towards meaningful innovation. And again, new programming, new ways to reach folks, new ways to support caregivers and help their supporters. So we had this whole process, we did this work, we had a process, we kind of gave questions before, we had a narrator or an interviewer and a scribe. We learned from this process that people were actually quite happy to be asked. The questions that we did, I can't go into all of them, but one of my favorite is, what are caregivers hearing? And so I'm just going to touch into that one a little bit so you get an idea of what the questions sound like, so that you can look how we approached questioning and how we held space for caregivers as we interviewed them. So here's an example of a question that's kind of getting at what are caregivers hearing? So I asked, and in many cases, I was the interviewer here, please describe a particular time in which you felt truly supported by a friend or family member. So they would share that. And then there were follow-up questions like, how has this changed over time? How have they, who has supported you? What did they do to support you? How did it feel? How did you feel heard by them? And kind of what types of conversations did you find most helpful or useful? And again, one of my favorite pieces, like, what do you wish your friends and family knew about your role as a caregiver? So those were kind of how the questions were framed as we were developing these personas. And this is just a little insight into how we did that part of the process. The next slide talks, a little bit about an overview here. These are kind of the caregiver personas that we developed or added onto from the work that we did. And again, so much of what we do is listen. We're again advocating for understanding caregivers and their needs and how they can best feel supported. If you take anything away from this presentation, I'd love that to be that caregivers want to feel seen, heard, and understood. So just as an aside, Christy shared this recently, about how this, there's a question that we could add to kind of onboarding and intakes across all kinds of settings to really help caregivers feel seen, heard, and understood. And that could be, across disciplines, starting with this question: are you caring for someone else besides yourself? And if so, who? How are you feeling? And maybe on a scale of 0 to 10, how are you managing? To me, this is part of prevention. And again, part of caregivers being seen, again, across disciplines and across settings.
Not to give anything away or put in a little plug for our Systems of Care Summit presentation, but that right there is the focus of our presentation, the getting to the prevention part and getting that system of care able to include that question in every PCP appointment for an adult or even a young adult to know and get to the crux of, are you caring for anyone else? And what's hard and how are you managing? It's a huge improvement is the way we see it, because so many of us are caring for others. Whoopsie. This is interesting. So we're missing that newer slide that we put in that, which is fine because I can talk about it and we'll make sure it's in the final slide deck. But we basically we see ourselves as social entrepreneurs, and we do see ourselves as innovators in this space of caring for the caregiver. We're huge fans over here of, we sure hope someone else has figured this out as our first place of reference. And yet we're a very small and mighty team over here caring for caregivers. And so the National Alliance on Caregiving and the AARP presented Caregiving in the US 2020, a report which included a variety of existing personas. But those personas were really geared towards those 53 million unpaid family caregivers of all kinds in the world, of which caregivers to those with mental illness are a smaller subset. And those are our primary constituents, of course. So we took those existing caregiver personas that they had created, and there were a few that resonated with us tremendously. And the one for which the slide you won't see today, but it'll be in your slide deck is, excuse me, the high intensity caregiver. And that high intensity caregiver that the National Alliance for Caregiving and AARP found to be really looked at those people who their loved ones are often living with them. They feel especially alone. They have a tremendous amount of financial strain. They're also working full time. The financial strain is both personally and on behalf of their loved one. They're doing their loved one's finances as well. They're having a very hard time taking care of their own health and have a very high level of emotional stress. And so when we look at that high intensity caregiver and how they might be feeling and how we might be able to support them, the things that we could be doing is providing resources for how to better budget or manage finances? Can we get some of the banking team? What kind of services does the banking team have that are going to make that easier for that high intensity caregiver to do the financial strain? Do they need some at no cost resources, both legal or financial? Do we need to put them in touch with legal aid? Do we need to find another social service agency that could help with finances, like a Benjamin Rose We Care program? So what are some of those resources, either locally or nationally, that could help with some of the special burdens for that type of caregiver? The other thing that the high intensity caregiver really is looking for, they really need some respite. Now, I'm not going to lie. Most of the caregiver personas we're going to talk about could really use some respite. But the high intensity caregiver, because they're going on all terms, and when you see this slide later, you'll see the image that we chose. It's a sandwich, and it includes the family in the middle of that sandwich. And that caregiver, no matter who it is in that family, there's a multi-generational family with the bread and the lettuce and the tomatoes. They are very much the center of that sandwich. I often call myself a panini caregiver because not only am I a sandwich, I am being squeezed from both ends. Two parents, 1991, divorced, so separate households, and young adult kids, including that forever caregiver role I play with my son. I am a panini. I am being squished from both sides. My sandwich could not be any more squished. So respite is really appreciated by the high intensity caregiver. And that can look like all different kinds of programs. There are many, and usually those are local kind of offerings. And the AAAs, the areas on aging, can often put you in touch with some respite services, either where the loved ones would go somewhere or offer in-home support and care so that the caregiver can leave. There's some other ways. There's some nice high-tech ways we can offer some respite support for those high-intensity caregivers. And there's a lot of different virtual care space now being offered where you can put cameras to keep eyes on your loved ones, to be monitored by a third party in case of emergency. It's really a step above that life alert, but before they're ready to go to potentially an assisted living or skilled nursing facility. So that was the one we chose from those established personas. And now we're going to jump into our personas that result as a result of our interviews with our caregivers. Jenny and I are very protective of our caregivers, so we say our, but they're really the Courage to Caregivers clients or participants that we have served over the last now going on 6 years. We've represented diversity in all ways in our interviews that were selected, caregivers who were managing and caregivers who are not managing and everything in between. And many of these personas that we are going to share that we have created are really a mix of caregivers. So after an interview, you may not just see like a Christy caregiver persona that comes to light. Some of those are so nuanced or overlap in many ways that they're a result of several different interviews. But these are some recurring themes that we found. And we're hoping to give you not only an overview of the personas that we've created, but also some takeaways for you, how you as a family peer supporter in your area or a supervisor, professional caregiver in some way, or maybe you're looking out for a neighbor, friend, or colleague, and you're a ripple effect caregiver trying to help that primary family caregiver. We hope to give you some tools and tips on how, if someone comes to mind as we're telling you about these caregivers, think about how you could support them. We also invite you as we go through. So Jenny's going to take the first one here, the Just Do It caregiver, but put in the chat. If you align with the Just Do It caregiver, put some things in the chat that you would really appreciate. What would you need, and how could we support you if this was you? So we'd love to have that sharing space in the chat. But Jenny, tell us all about the Just Do It caregiver. I love this one.
Yeah, so I think we saw one of these folks today in our group. So these are folks that just don't consider themselves a caregiver. They're just doing what they're doing. I'm just a mom. I'm just a grandparent. I'm just a social worker out here doing the things. They want to talk to their support team about anything but caregiving. and really want their life outside of caregiving validated. So, I mean, what are their other roles that they want people to focus on? You know, maybe they want to be known for, you know, throwing the best parties or having, you know, they really want folks to say, hey, I see you and you're more than just a caregiver to me. This is a person who lives it, but they don't want to be called it necessarily. And like literally that happened today. We had someone in our group say, I'm not caregiving, my person is just living here. And now as a professional, I go, well, that's interesting because they're supporting someone with significant mental illness. And I just kind of go, well surely you are doing something to help support this person. It isn't a room and board situation. They just don't align with that caregiver title. They're just doing their job here. So how do they want to be supported and talked to? Again, asking them about their lives in addition to caregiving, see them as people, not just caregivers, and maybe ask about future plans, again, outside of caregiving. I know this person was really focused on the what's next for them after this person gets and feels better, and just really thought that was interesting. So yeah, that is the Just Do It caregiver.
And if there's anyone who feels like they align as a Just Do It caregiver, right? They're just doing it. No questions. Here we are. If you align as a Just Do It caregiver, or you know one, and you have any needs that you think would be good to support this kind of caregiver, feel free to put them in the chat, because again, that's how we can all, in the name of the ripple effect, better support these types of carers. I think that when we were in group today with the Just Do It caregiver you were referencing, Jenny, my first thought that came to mind was they felt like their loved one was really stuck, and it's their responsibility to move forward. And I appreciate and respect that, understand it. And so as we support loved ones who might feel stuck, or maybe we ourselves as caregivers feel stuck, how do we get to the root of that stuckness? That's not a word, but I'm going to call it today, the stuckness, and help them to move forward or progress. Because otherwise, those Just Do It caregivers, where that person is living in their home but isn't making progress, they might set up camp and like it there. They're going to stay for a long time. So how do we get them to progress? Because we know that's their goal. And so one of the things we talked about was helping them to find out what motivates their loved one. What motivates their loved one? And how can we gently nudge towards greater motivation to getting unstuck? And of course, none of us want to do it, the work for them. And these Just Do It caregivers do not want you to do it for them. But how can we gently empower them to see that they can play that role in getting their loved ones unstuck? So that's something that stuck out for me today, Jenny. So I appreciate that.
Someone in the chat reminding us most caregivers are multiple caregivers, children's parents, family, community. Yes, 100%. We see that every single day. Lifelong caregiver. Biggest takeaway on this one, and this is how Christy sees herself at this point. Fun fact, Christy, did you mention that you were interviewed for this project a long time ago? And you couldn't even recognize yourself in this. So yeah, we really tried to make this conglomerates of people, you know, as opposed to like, oh yeah, that's me. But the biggest takeaway here is that they aren't seeing empathy. They're seeing advice giving, sympathy, and pity. And I mean, honestly, who likes that? Like, no one wants to be pitied, especially caregivers who are in this like lifelong, long haul situation, not supportive here. But how could we support and talk to this type of caregiver? I mean, know that many times they do want help and they want you, but they want you to take some initiative to help them, not just like shoot some advice over and then peace out. I mean, they don't want you to fix them with your advice. They want to show they want you to show them with your actions. So you could help them troubleshoot, but do this in a trauma-informed, tool-based way. I mean, or if you're in a place like being in a peer role as a peer supporter, you know, maybe this is a caregiver that you'd want to share your own experiences and maybe possibly normalize what they're going through. But gosh, don't pity them. They're going to hate that.
Mm-hmm. And I'd be remiss if we didn't talk about those single parents out there, right, who are doing this alone. And there's a few other personas that really resonate for me with single parenting. But if you're a lifelong caregiver to someone with a chronic, inconsistent illness, and you're, armoring up for that lifelong journey that just feels never ending and you just feel so alone, that pity part is really what comes to front of mind here. So just when we greet those people, making sure that it's not a, oh, you poor thing, or, gosh, what are some other things I've heard along the way? Of just, how are you doing it? I just can't even imagine. And people being so eager to give advice and wanting to fix the problem, when in reality, most of these folks, single or feeling alone, really anyone, wanting to make sure that they have someone that they can just listen to, right, that listen to them. So having someone say, that sounds really hard. Can we go for a walk? I'm here for you. And you don't even have to ask a lot of questions. Sometimes when you're a lifelong caregiver, you don't even want to talk about your caregiving because you live it every day, all day, and you want to talk about anything but caregiving. So let's go out and do something that doesn't involve caring and talk about something else to be able to support them. Do we get anything in the chat? Any other ways to support?
Yeah, bunches of stuff. If I don't hit you, it's not hit you up in the chat doesn't mean I'm ignoring you. I'm just trying to kind of combine folks. Someone mentioned when people think of caregiver, they think it has to do with aging parents. Yeah, that's something we think about and work with every single day. Someone needing support when systems fail. Again, I know that this could be being disillusioned with systems is a common caregiver theme as well. So yes, someone talking about allowing natural consequences to play out when we were talking about that stuck at home loved one. Someone who uses humor as a resilience strategy, same. And then posted a meme, which I always love. Helping people see the positives. Sometimes someone imagines someone being with them during more difficult visits. So that's even a support team that isn't present. I kind of like that idea. It's kind of like you are your ultimate support team. So I can feel that here. Thanks everybody for sharing.
And that one really resonates with me, that concept of, and I've done this with friends, I suppose, more than with my peers, because often sometimes my peers aren't close enough for me to do that with. But and then also, I guess, my peers, other parents, to model doing that for their loved ones, right? I'll be with you when you have to make that really hard call to your therapist or that really hard call to set up the next appointment. But I'm happy to drive you. I'm happy to take the notes so that you can just focus on what that appointment visit might involve. And I'm here to be with you, but I can be silent, I can listen, or I can distract you. What do you need? I love that. That's a really, really good example. Thank you. Okay, the next one. This might resonate with someone out there, the survivor thriver. We do a really fun presentation on thriving and this concept of thrival for caregivers, because, aren't we all just looking towards a life where we feel like we are thriving? And so, and this caregiver, really what they're seeing from their support team is they're choosing to stay no matter how hard it is with their loved ones, when the world, and often their support network, I mean, we're hearing this from these support networks, has said, you should leave. This is too much. This is too hard. You should leave. I'll just let that sit with you for a minute. You should leave. And they're like, no, I won't leave. This is too important. And then they hear from others, including those on their support team. Because as we all know, sometimes our family members, even though they're our family members, they may not be the most supportive because they just don't understand. And they say things like, why in the world do you put up with this? And that's very hurtful to hear when they're doing their best and trying. I think they've also probably been along the ones who've said, those parents with neurotypical kids who've said, oh, it's just about boundaries. If you just had better boundaries, you'd be just fine. They're also thinking about, they feel very isolated, as most caregiver personas honestly did, because they just feel like no one else understands. They're very determined. They definitely see themselves as survivors. They are determined to make this work at all costs. And so when I say costs, I mean physical, emotional, social. They feel like they've lost much of their social network. They feel like they've neglected all of their own physical, mental, and emotional health concerns themselves. And it will take its toll over time. They're feeling strong, but they also realize how much they've neglected. And honestly, from these interviews, I think what we learned the most, Jenny, was that they feel the most supported when someone is just checking in. And it doesn't have to be elaborate, right? It's the, hey, how was your day? I hope you're hanging in there. Maybe it's a text. Maybe it's a call, just letting someone know that you're thinking of them. Maybe it's a note. Gosh, good old fashioned note. Maybe it's a card. Maybe it's a plant. Maybe it's I picked up these apples when I was at the farmer's market because I thought you might enjoy them and left them on your doorstep. So nothing elaborate, because this person doesn't want to be seen as weak, that's for sure. Like, oh, I don't need your help. So if you were to call and say, what do I'm here anytime. You just let me know when I can be of help. This caregiver is not going to call you if that's what you say. They're probably not going to even tell you, like, hey, I'm stopping by the grocery store today. Can I pick you up anything? They'll probably tell them everything's just fine. But if you know they love a certain kind of apple and they're back in stock, just dropping those apples at the door will mean a whole lot. And it won't send the message that you think they can't handle it themselves. It's just I'm thinking of you. We got this. They might need help identifying their strengths, even though they're super, super strong. Everybody loves to be validated for their strengths. And so just saying to them how much you notice and what a great job they're doing, instead of that judgment that they're hearing from the rest of the support network. And then giving them some ways to combat the isolation and loneliness. And I will be honest and say, this has been hard for me to support these survivor thriver caregivers that I support personally. And yet I see the pain that the isolation and loneliness is taking on them. I just happen to be surrounded by a lot of people in my home, so I'm rarely alone. But when I go to look to help those who are the most lonely in my network, finding those ways to just pop over. Can we just, even if we're both reading a book together, can we go for coffee? Can we take our dogs for a walk? You just happen to be free one night because your loved ones have been cared for in other ways. Let's go get a meal. Let's go for a walk in the park. Let's go check out the movie we've been wanting to see. Or maybe it's just a phone call while we're both taking a walk in our own neighborhoods. Or maybe we're just finding other remote ways to connect. We had one of our groups, I think, mentioned earlier, they're connecting, playing Scrabble together. So just knowing that that person's on the other line playing Scrabble together is a way to connect and feel less alone, doing something that feels very typical. So what's in the chat? If you feel like a survivor thriver caregiver, what are ways that you feel seen, heard, and understood? What are ways that you might feel less alone and more supported? What are some things you need? So we'd love to have you put those in the chat. Jenny, you can let me know if you see any.
Yeah, so someone's relating to this caregiver persona, saying that her therapist told them, sorry, I'm using pronouns, I'm making assumptions, but that their therapist told them they had a savior complex. So yeah, I also like this image when we were talking about the comment earlier in the chat about imagining someone being with them during more difficult visits. That person said, I often envision all of my ancestors holding me up when I feel at the end of my rope. And yeah, that is a beautiful image. And I hope lots of people loved that. So I'm hoping people can maybe use that as a tool when they're feeling isolated and alone.
I like that.
Someone that I believe relates to this persona, just, they want to be seen and heard. And yeah, that's an overarching theme we're seeing here, both in this presentation and the work we do. So thank you, everyone.
The next persona we came up with was this giver caregiver. And maybe this resonates with you, this juggling it all, right? Just doing it all. And the person I'm thinking of that fits this persona for us, this person has cared for more people. Not that it's a competition, because we like to say often that it's not a competition, but she would win. And she is just caring for people. She is looking out for everyone. And she's in a retail job so that people even come into her job and she starts taking care of them. I mean, she was born this way. She is a natural giver caregiver. She has seen it all. Like, there's just little you can throw at her that been there, done that, and not afraid to tell their story. I think that's a really important, because many people keep those stories private, especially us mental illness caregivers. She has been very open. We like to say that by sharing our stories, we provide hope and healing to others. And she definitely comes to mind when I see that. She often will feel some level of comparison. So, ooh, girl, you win and I can't top that. So you've got it. That's much harder than what I have. So people will back off. They want to give advice, a lot of advice giving and judgment, a lot of input. If you only had those better boundaries, if you only this, you're enabling, you're letting them get away with something, instead of having that judgment-free, shame-free, unconditional love that we like to hold. They think that the best part about caregiving is reducing stigma. So they are out there sharing their story, volunteering with with us, with NAMI, with all different kind of organizations, spreading the word, training and teaching and educating people to really combat that stigma that we all know is so true, which actually is why most people don't share their stories, right? All in the name of helping someone else. No one should have it as hard. Let me help you. And, I've seen that. And offering just little tips or tools that may have worked for her, but doing it without that judgment or shame of each person's different. So it worked for me, maybe worth a try for you. But if it doesn't, tell me what does work. This person I'm thinking of, and within this giver caregiver, caregiving is their identity through and through in all ways. They see themselves as caring throughout all that they do. And they feel the most supported when someone is listening. I mean, truly listening, active listening with their whole body, eye contact and leaning in, and someone who's non-judgmental in every way. And we all know those people that can judge and shame. And so listening for that language. Often you'll hear some of those barriers to self-care, which is not being able to have the time, right? I just don't have time. So this caregiver, because they're juggling it all and only see themselves as a caregiver, might say, I just don't have the time. Or is it because they can't prioritize that among all the people they're caring for? Is there a way to squeeze in that self-care of taking care of themselves while they're caring for others? And who knows, maybe caring for others is part of their own self-care. They often ask for more time in the day. Like, if there's one thing that they're missing, if I could only just have a few more hours in my day. So this is likely someone who's going to cut back on sleep, sacrifice sleep to do more caring. So those are the giver caregiver and how we might support them. Does anyone want to put it in the chat if this resonates with you, this persona, and ways that you might feel better supported or ways we could help you for the greater support network? We'd love to hear it. Put it in the chat. Because if this is your full and complete identity, and we want to be able to support you too, let us know. Anything pop in the chat, Jenny, from giver caregivers out there?
Just a general shout out for caregivers actually being superheroes, and that they would trust many caregivers they've met, they would trust their life with. So general
I
shout
love
out.
that.
Thank
I
you.
love that because they can do it all, right? Okay, who's next, Jenny?
Is the isolated caregiver. This is a tough one. Kind of makes me a little sad when we talk about this one, because they're really seeing people avoiding them because they don't know what to say or do about the caregiving situation. The biggest takeaway I see here is that people are avoiding their loved one, and this loved one is a huge part of their life. They don't want you to ignore their loved one because maybe, the general public does, or, that this is this invisible caregiving that they really think that, what I hate about caregiving is that it is invisible, that especially that the work they do as this isolated caregiver. I think that the best way to support someone like this is to truly ask about their loved one, and to get deep with them, like how do you support your loved one, and how do you support yourselves, like talking about this caregiving relationship because it exists. They want to feel that the questions that you come to them with are honest and compassionate, and not judging and not avoiding. You can also ask them maybe like what they love about caregiving, and what they love about the person they're supporting, to really help them feel seen and supported. So ask that isolated caregiver, what do they love about caregiving, and how you can support them as you're also recognizing the person that they care for.
I think we serve a lot of these caregivers, Jenny, in our peer support program, because matching with a peer, it's that you don't even have to share your story. We've been there, we know this, and you immediately feel less alone. I know many of the peers I'm supporting right now happen to be only children taking care of parents because they feel like they're it. And they don't recognize all the support network within the systems of care that are out there for them. But this is a really, like you said, this is a really hard one. And there's often a lot of tears. There's a lot of tears. They don't see any way out. Although I think that's another one of our caregivers, but yes, isolated and alone.
Yeah, I mean, and we've mentioned, there's overlap among these, and it may depend on the day that you're coming to caregiving too, how you kind of identify here. Quickly, before we move on to the next slide, someone wrote, stigma for caregivers, given what their children are supporting, is hard to break through. Caregiving is hard work. I tend to have family members who minimize the amount of effort, time, energy, motivation, and support that is needed to truly care for someone. Amen. And that's really what we're trying to shine the light on through our work here. And that I'm assuming, Heather, you're talking about caregivers can be stuck to. Yes, that is definitely something we've seen and would agree with.
Absolutely. So the team of one caregiver might also look like some of the other ones, and they see that people assume that they've given everything up to do this job of caring for others. They hear a lot of judgment from others. They think there's just not an off switch. So these are those caregivers that we see that probably sleep with their phone on because they're worried about missing a call, an emergency or a crisis. And over time, we've convinced those caregivers to turn off their phones. It takes a lot of work and support to do that, but usually that's where these are going to fit. These might be single parents. These might be someone who just feels like all the responsibilities of the caring falls to them. that no one else knows how to do it in quite the same way. These are people who usually other people have fallen down on the job, meaning they promised to support them, but over and over again, they're disappointed because they haven't followed through with those empty promises. And so it's really scary then to ask for help and ask for what you need when you feel like no one has shown up for you. And of course, they're the primary caregiver because they feel like they're the only one doing that caring. They definitely feel like they're in this alone, and they are one of the hardest personas to accept help of any kind because no one's going to do it the same way. No one's going to do it the way I would. And anytime they've asked for help, they find some way to find something at fault in not being able to do that quite the same way. And let's face it, right? That when we're caring for someone we love, we'd like to think that we are the best at doing that, no matter what our relationship of care is. And sometimes one of the ways we can get help is to invite others in, and they may not do it in quite the same way we do. This caregiver has an especially hard time with that. And so how can we support these caregivers to potentially reframe some of the ways we accept help? So Jenny's really great at helping our clients work on reframing. We can also work on expectations. We have a whole unit on expectations that we do, and encouraging those caregivers to get the help that they need. We have one more persona. Anything in the chat, Jenny, before I move on?
Yeah, a couple things. The if you want it done right, do it yourself mentality is prevalent and exhausting.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. And that, oh my, oh, this is the same person. Hello again. That if you want something, or no, sorry, this hits home for me. Wow, this is a mini therapy session for me today. Love the material and content. And then I intentionally practice asking for and accepting help. And I love that. I think the more we can do that as caregivers, again, not easy, but it is definitely a practice that can support you. And so you aren't feeling so overwhelmed, burnt out, all of those things. So thank you.
Thank you.
Adding this.
And then our last persona today, the no way out caregiver. They don't see anyone taking any steps to be of help, and plenty of advice. They do hear gratitude, but never feel like it's enough. They think they just really don't like any of their caregiver. They didn't ask for this. Why is this happening? It's the why me. It's the why me. I have a peer that I would put in this category right now that I'm supporting, who basically week after week is like, I'm done. I can't do this anymore. I'm just done. And so we step back. She starts almost every session with, I'm done. And we step back and we look and break that down, knowing that this is a lifelong journey and it's just going to get harder. They definitely feel supported when they can delegate hard decisions, and they don't have any problem delegating that to anyone else who might say yes, versus some of those other personas that we said that likes to own those decisions. This caregiver is happy to delegate those to anyone who will offer, and that's extended families, neighbors, colleagues, places of employment. They're out there asking for help all over the place. So for these caregivers and supporting them, I have just tried to find ways to break it down. And Jenny and I talk about this in a lot of ways, making things micro so that they don't feel so big. Because everything can feel so big when you feel like there's no way out. And so let's look at small little micro ways to chip away at this, finding new ways out, maybe. And maybe it comes back to some of what we talked about earlier and being stuck too. But they definitely feel stuck in that there's no way out. So anyone feels like a no way out caregiver, please put ways we can support you, because this is a hard one too. Did we say that on every slide, Jenny? This is hard too.
We
I
do.
think
I'm
so.
actually giggling about someone put this in the chat, and this is so real. And someone commented that's so real. What about the pissed off at family members caregiver?
We forgot that one. Sorry,
I
but I
think
bet.
everyone's been that caregiver before.
Yeah. Or the resented. Yeah, we tried to be both playful and real, but yes.
I won't forget that one. Yeah.
No, that's great. And so that we don't go too far over, Lori, apologies. We just like to remind you that caregiving is a journey. It is a journey. It includes a whole lot of awareness and self-awareness. It includes a lot of acceptance, both of our loved ones and ourselves to our present and future situation. Acknowledgement, this is hard and it's a journey. And we can find ways to cope with courage and compassion and build our resilience. It is possible. We see ourselves as hope givers too, and we know you can. That's for another day, but for today, that's what we would love to connect with you, be a resource for you, chat offline, friend us on LinkedIn and all the places, follow Courage to Caregivers. Jenny and I hope to be a resource. So, Lori, I think.
Well, I will let Jenny finish off the messages in the chat because some of these are good ones.
Will do. Besides me, and I don't. If you didn't mean to be funny with the pissed off at family caregivers person, I didn't mean to insult you. But it did bring me a tickle because I think I've definitely talked to that caregiver before. So thank you for sharing. Someone just saying really great stuff to think about and process all that our fabulous caregivers do. They should be recognized so much more. Yeah, 100%. I think, like Christy mentioned, I think part of our job is just really advocating for these are real people with real needs. They aren't just someone in the sidelines. They should be, as someone mentioned earlier, the captain of the care team, not just someone, pulling strings from the sides. So one thing I struggle with is holding on to the point that it hurts me. I work hard to hold on and not to the point it soaks in too far. Oh, that's tough. I'm assuming you're talking about caregiving here. So that is really rough. Christy, do you have anything to respond to with that person?
I think that your self-awareness and noticing, what Jenny and I will often say is that it starts by noticing. So the fact that you're noticing that it's to the point of feeling like it's hurting you. And often what we'll hear from our peers is things like, I just can't take my own health is suffering.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, this came from my lived experience 10 years ago, caring for my brother. I had let every part of my own health suffer, and I was burned out and failing many, both physically. So just being aware that it is, and then asking for help we see as a sign of strength. So asking for what you need and finding some of those additional supports, including people like us and NTAC and Friedla and all the agencies they support and serve. Knowing that you can ask for help is the first step, and then finding and securing that help is going to be the next step, and making just really small baby steps until you can feel like you're starting to come up for air.
Thank you.
Somebody did ask, is it possible if, I'm wondering, can a caregiver have aspects of all of these personas that you just talked about? I heard you say they overlap and stuff, so I would imagine that the answer to that would be yes.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Yeah, 100%. These are kind of our like conglomerate of folks. I think, definitely if you heard us mention, we can think of a person that is like 100% this persona, but I would say many caregivers have some aspects, and I think it's different, again, depending on what's happening during the day, and all of those things, and the caregiving challenges that they're going through as well.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, someone is forgiving me for me laughing at their pissed off at caring. Yeah, sometimes I laugh inappropriately, but that one did really make me chuckle. This person is caring for their 97-year-old mother. Sibling comes down to help, but maybe they're just down there enjoying the weather. Yes. Okay. You are definitely the pissed off at family members.
And it can be okay.
And that's okay.
Yeah. We all get that a time or two. So thank you. There are lots of thank yous in the chat as well. So thank you for that great information. We have about 10 minutes if anybody has any basic questions they want to ask, or I am not opposed to giving you 10 minutes back of your day.
Same. Yeah. Either way works for us.
Okay. Seeing lots of thank yous. So I think most everybody's pretty much done, but I want to finish with the rest of our slides. So go to the next one. This was the comments and questions. Next one. So in your slides, when you get them, you'll get these 2 pages. This page of resources from Courage to Caregivers. This is all of the information that they have on their website. And the next page are just links to other, if you go to the next page, links to other ideas or thoughts of how to engage with families. This is caring for the caregivers is also engaging with those families. I mean, it's the same thing. You want them to be involved. It's everybody's business to engage with families. I want to also think about especially those single families that we come in contact with, moms who can't work because they've got a child at home that needs so much attention, but they need to be involved. We need to be aware of them as well. And the other side of that, not the other side, but another side of single parenting is fatherhood. You know, fathers sometimes aren't included in the whole family scheme, and sometimes they're removed from the family scheme, but we need to somehow figure out how to bring them back into it, because we know, and the research shows, that kids do better when they have fathers involved in their lives. And so however that looks. So that's, you know, some of those resources are there. So additional resource, the next slide, please. So next month, we have a great presentation from Fredla's very own Pat Hunt. We put together a survey last year that came up with some really interesting outcomes of peer-parent support, and we want to be able to share those with all of you. And outcomes, if we aren't looking for outcomes, we're not doing our work, right? I mean, we have to have positive outcomes, and we have some really good ones to share with you. If you're here today, you're registered for the remainder of this year, of this session. But feel free to share this registration link with colleagues and encourage them to join us. Next slide, please. Again, I just want to remind you that you're going to get a certificate of completion. You'll get a copy of the presentation that was used in this event. Oh, except for you were going to add a slide, right, Christy? And then you'll send that to me. Okay, and then I'll get that to Bridget. So if you get that to me, and then the recording, it's available on the website, NTAC's website, also on their YouTube, and you'll get a copy of the recording along tomorrow or the next day with the slides. Okay, next slide. Okay, so we need to hear from you so we can keep bringing you these free resources. And I see Bridget has put the survey in the chat, and please feel free to go there. It's so important to me and for us to present and provide the information that is good for you, to make sure that we're doing it in an appropriate way and we're getting you the information that you're looking for. So please, you have 3 ways to access the services. The link will be put in the chat box, which it has. It will automatically pop up in your browser when you end this webinar, and it will be provided in the follow-up email. Not very long. It takes just a few minutes to fill out the survey, and we take the information you give us very seriously. Okay, the next slide, please. So this is NTAC's information, all the ways that you can access NTAC and the stuff that they have that they're involved in. They have lots of webinars, lots of events just like this one that are on different subjects. having to do with system of care, and all kinds of things. So please, if you need any information, or if you want more information, you can access it on their website. Next slide. So here's their contact information. If you are with a system of care, or if you are not with a system of care, if you just need more information, you're welcome to call NTAC and get a hold of them, tell them what your issue is, and they'll connect you with somebody who can give you the information you're looking for. So here's all of their contact information. I think there's just one more slide. Yeah, this is just Sam's slide to say that their mission is to reduce the impact of substance abuse and mental illness on America's communities. And we are in a position right now where this is really high on the list of priorities for the Health and Human Services. So they have also got a lot of resources on their website. So I want to thank you all for joining us today, and thanks for being part of the Family Exchange. We appreciate you so much, and we'll look forward to seeing you all next month. Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Thanks all.